it was like having a snake in the cockpit with us. You know it was going to bite you, but you didn't know when. But, we made that decision based on our dedication to getting the job done. And I want you to make sure that if they interfere, that part of their country looks like it did in the Stone Ages. That was a direct order from the President of the United States. I had no intention. I had no intention of being in the Air Force for a career. I came in during Vietnam when we all had a commitment, so I planned on being in 4 years, getting out. They told me my eyes were too poor to fly, and I didn't worry about that because I was going to be in and out in 4 years. So when I decided, after about 3 years, I was with the crews in Vietnam and making sure that the airplanes were safe. They talked me into applying for flying training. Well, my eyes were 20/20/20/20. So I don't know whose physical I got on my original one, but they said I had 20/40 vision, which I'd never have. And my eyesight today is 20/20/20/20. So anyhow, I went up to flying school after that. But the airplane that I was on was the U-2 and the C-130Ds, which were the ones that carried unmanned vehicles back in the 1960s. So went off to flying school, flew B-52s, FB-111s, and then the SR-71. Flew that for 4 years, went to the Pentagon, spent a year in running finances for the Strategic Air Command. And then they asked me to be the program manager for the SR for 3 years. Did that, left Washington, went back to Beale Air Force Base, California, and was the commander of the Avionics Maintenance Squadron there, which maintained all of the electronics and sensors for all of the airplanes that we had on base, the U-2, the SR. So after that, I retired, went to work for Goodyear Aerospace, but by the time I got there, it was already Loral Corporation, which ultimately merged with Lockheed Martin. I had a job offer from Lockheed Martin back when I retired, but I couldn't afford to live in California. It was just too expensive. So I went with a company in Phoenix, Arizona. Did that in Arizona for 11 years. Spent a year as a program manager. And we'll talk about that later at lessons learned and things. Okay. Did that for 11 years. After that, I was promoted to director, took over international business development, and was fortunate enough to build that from $750K in spares to about $100 million a year in 10 years. Got offered a job in Australia to be the VP of Business Development for a new joint venture company that Lockheed was part of. Went to Australia and ended up spending 20 years there. Came back, retired out of there, and came back to the United States. In my time with Lockheed, I was a program manager, Director of Programs, Director of Business Development for International Programs for Lockheed Martin in Arizona. Was the Vice President of Business Development for a company called RLM Systems in Australia, which was a defense company like the one I came from. And then Lockheed asked me to build a new line of business for them. Back in the late 1990s, the United States defense budget was going down, and Lockheed was looking to expand their horizons and other businesses that could use the same systems engineering skills that it used to build its airplanes, its rockets, and its sensors. So I bid on I was program manager that bid on a program in the rail industry that puts safety systems in the cab of the locomotive, replaces signals with a signal in the locomotive, and allows the train driver to see what his authorities are, both speed and distance. If he tries to violate any of that, it will caution him, warn him, and then stop the train. So it'll not allow centrifugal force to have to prove itself by having a guy go around a 70K turn at 150K. So, and then I retired out of that and came back to the US. Been retired since 2018. So that gives you some basis to ask some questions. So I've got the flying experience, the maintenance experience, program management experience, and things like that. So the floor is yours.
It is an incredible career. There is so many aspects to it. I would like to take you back about 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago. Okay. To 1966, if I'm not mistaken, when you entered the Air Force and you started flying the U-2 and the B-52. I am sure the vision of the seasoned professional, the seasoned engineer, the seasoned pilot didn't exist. You entered there as a rookie, basically.
Actually,
yeah.
Let me take you back. I'll tell
Yeah.
you a lesson that I learned in 1982 when I went to the Pentagon.
Mhm.
My general at that time was a guy named Bill Campbell, the Major General, one of the original SR-71 pilots. He asked me to please set up a meeting between the original engineers on the SR and the drone that flew on top, the D-21, with the JPL people that wanted to build a Mach 10 missile. And so I did. I set that up. And the JPL guys came back a month later and said, we have lost it. We cannot replicate what those guys did 20 years ago. So Lockheed Skunk Works had the right engineers in the right building environment under the right management concept to succeed where they couldn't in 1982. Back then, they did not have the oversight that they had in 1982. They were given a task. They were small teams of people working under Kelly Johnson, who was an absolute genius. I don't know if you know that name or not.
Absolutely, of course.
Okay. I got to know Kelly and I got to know Ben Rich a lot better when I was especially in the Pentagon. And absolute geniuses. They did with slide rules what most people can't do today with computers. And so we had the right engineers in the country at the right time, in the right place, under the right management. And that's how they built a Mach 4 drone in 7 months. Okay, in 7 months, from idea to flying. They built the SR-71 in just a few years, where now you can't even get to the design phase in that kind of a program. So we had the right engineers back then. So your idea about the professional engineer, no, Lockheed has had those professional engineers for a very long time.
Those two are incredible programs. Hence why people are talking about them until today. They place a lot of emphasis into the CIA driving initiatives, but I believe it is very crucial to speak to engineers and people who actually flew those concepts and finalized proposals to understand that it is not just governmental initiatives being driven and money being thrown into those projects. It is also, as you said, the right engineers being at the right place at the right time with the right management on top of all of that. So how does somebody who is flying the SR-71 goes into the development phase and further development phase of the actual airplane? Did you have it in your mind to be able, after you completed your service, to be in a position where you can actually engineer the product where you were flying on?
No, no, I went into business development and program management. But what I did, I tell you, you asked an interesting question there. Because when I became the program manager, the first thing that I focused on was the things that bothered me when I was flying. And that's what I've tried to fix first. The first thing that I addressed was unstart. I don't know if you know what that means, but the spikes that come out of the engine travel 26 inches and capture the shock wave before it goes into the engine. So I had analog inlets when I flew. And at one mission, we had 17 unstarts. 17. Usually a crew might see one or two every few missions, but we had 17 one day. But we were launched by the general in charge of intelligence for the Strategic Air Command. And he said, guys, I need this mission. I need it. So I'm sorry, I had a phone call.
No worries.
I need this mission. And so do whatever you have to do, make it happen for me. So we endured that. And it's kind of like being in the cockpit with a snake. You know it's going to bite you, but you don't know when. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So when we created digital inlets, the newer crews never flew and had an unstart. It eliminated that problem. So as far as engineering, I was there managing the engineering, but never was part of it.
It brings a very interesting point as far as leadership in the engineering space. They say that a person who is leading a project or a program manager for that matter doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer. Is that the case, or was that the case in Lockheed? Did you have to have engineering acumen to be a program manager?
No, you do not. You have to have leadership skills.
How do you develop those? Is the question, I think.
Look, it's some of it's innate and some of it you can learn. First, you have to like people and be able to understand the fact that you can't do it yourself, but you have to use the people that you have available. And if you have an opportunity, bring others into it. But dealing with people is the key thing. And people will work for you and with you, but they have to know that you're going to be behind them. I took over a program, my first job at Lockheed. It was a failed program. And I replaced the program manager and the deputy. And I had 56 people working for me. I had a senior engineer, 53 engineers, and a couple of admin people. And not one, I interviewed everyone. Not one of those people wanted my job. Not one of those people wanted the senior engineer job. They wanted more interesting work, a better work environment, and better pay. But none of them wanted responsibility. So it's a different breed of cat that wants to step up and actually help people become managers and people that want to be managers. Okay, so we worked with it. They want direction, comfort, and a future and interesting work. So I gave them that as much as I could. But you know, you're only as good as the people, but you have to give them direction. They need to know where they are and where they're going, so they can all pull in the right direction. So talk to them. You know, I used to have meetings every week with everybody, so that everybody in the program heard the same thing. And we would say, here's where we are, here's what we've done this week, and here's where we're going next week. I need you to do this, your team to do this, your team to do this. And they all pulled together finally. But
You
go ahead.
mentioned that it is a different breed of cats. So basically, you were coming from an environment where the person who is next to you is a brother to you, and it means the world to you. I assume that you also had a very close relationship with your reconnaissance officer within the SR-71, flying those missions.
We
So
go ahead.
I believe it is a different mindset of the younger engineers who have never experienced those kinds of environments, that they are coming into the industry and they just want the nice position, the good pay, and the lack of responsibility, or at least initially that lack of responsibility. How can we fix that in the young generation? I have never experienced those circumstances.
Uh, in my case, first off, I'm a backseater, not a pilot. Okay,
Mhm.
so I was with a guy named Rich Judson, and we spent more time together than either of us would with our families. We got to know each other quite well. We could only fly operational sorties together. If either of us got sick, the other was grounded. The crew coordination was too close. Uh, the time elements, you could not make a mistake in the places we flew. And you had to know, based on a guy's voice, whether he was under stress or wasn't. And if one was under stress, the other guy lifted him up. So you raised your game if his game was lower, and he would do the same for you. And you had to trust each other completely because your lives depended on it.
So
And
you
we
couldn't
did.
see your pilot. You couldn't actually
No,
see them.
no, we were sitting tandem. So I was behind him. There was a wall between us. But we were always on hot mic, so we could hear each other breathing and talking. And you knew when the guy was under stress. But we didn't have that kind of stress, even in hostile environments. You know, we had enough confidence in ourselves and the airplane to get us out of there.
Was there ever a moment where you reached a point where you thought, well, this might not end up well?
uh, Actually, even being shot at I never was that concerned about that. You know, there were some times that we were low on fuel and
Mhm.
we're out in the middle of the ocean. We had to find a tanker or put the airplane in the water. So that was the most stressful thing. I remember one time on a European sortie that we flew out of the UK, out of Mildenhall, that it was especially hot, like minus 35 that day, and we were using more fuel than we normally did. So we had to abort part of the mission and head back to our tanker. So usually we never talked to the tanker. It was always done quietly with the radios in the cockpit. But that day I called the tanker and said, your new heading is head towards me. And we did that at the very top of where we were. And he did. And we got there with about 7,000 pounds of fuel on board.
For people who understand about aerospace, I understand how close you were. Um, how does somebody exiting this kind of stressful environment, because you have to operate under stress, channel all that energy into a business development sector? You mentioned you took a business from 750,000. Within the span of a decade, you turned it into a business of 100 million. Now, this is a simple sentence that bears a lot of weight, carries a lot of weight, and equal stress, I assume, behind it. So how did you manage to do that?
By listening to people and working with people. Uh, Communications is the key to every element of leadership. And growing a business is solving your customers' problems. So you listen to what your customer needs, understand the path to get there, or help him develop a path, and then go for it. And it may take time, uh, especially doing business in some countries. They test you, and sometimes it's a series of drinking bouts with them. In Asia, it's karaoke. which scared the dickens out of me the first time I had to stand up in a bar and sing. So I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's a very uncomfortable feeling
I've
for
had
me.
my moments. I've had my moments when I was younger.
Okay, but they need to understand whether they can trust you, and once they do, then you're becoming a part of their team to help them solve their problems. And then the best thing to do is just to listen as much as you can and try to help them become successful. If you do, you will become successful too.
I understand you're mentioning this continuously, that you place a lot of weight on people, on relationships. If you're successful with giving them what they want, then they will trust you, and then you're going to be able to become successful. So that is how you prioritize. First, it's the people, and then the technical slash strategic subjects that are going to follow. Is that the easy part then?
There's no easy part. But that's the reality that you can't do the job yourself. No matter how good you are, you can set the path, you can set the direction, and you can help people get the rocks out of their path to let them do the job as best they possibly can. And then trust them, but also verify. My first night as a commanding officer in the Air Force, they expected me to go home and come back the next morning at 7:30 and hit it running. I didn't. My first inspection was at midnight that night, and they weren't expecting me. So when my executive officer and I walked up to the first door at 12 o'clock at night and rang the bell, there was a guy working on his car inside the shop. I introduced myself as his new commander, and he didn't know what to say. And I didn't say anything. I knew, and I knew that he knew that he had screwed up. And I waited to see how long it was going to take his boss to come and talk to me about it. But you have to do the unexpected sometimes to let people know that there's a new game in town, that you're there, you know what you're doing. I was a maintenance supervisor before I went to flying school, so I had done all the jobs, branch chief, shop chief, that kind of thing, all the way up. So I knew how to run a maintenance organization, and they soon found that out. So once they respect you for what you're doing, and they know that you're going to be there, and you're looking, that you care, then they'll also improve, lift their game a bit, and they did. But I had some great
Yeah.
people working for me there.
Um, that dynamic that you're describing, it's very interesting to me that you're doing things that are unexpected to them so that you keep them on their toes. But in the other side, you display that you actually care about them. So you don't do this in a derogatory way to just like scare them and then you flee the scene. Just stay on top of them and you care about them at the same time. Um,
So, and they will test you,
yeah.
okay, to see if you do care. They will test you, and the word will spread like wildfire. Either way, if you don't care, they will know that too. If you do care and you're there for them, they will know that also.
Does that ambiguous element of surprising quote unquote people apply in business development as well? Because I mean, it makes sense that there is a framework that has to be followed and a plan that has to be followed to the dot. So how do you introduce that element of keeping people on their toes in a strategic plan?
You check, but you verify. Because I had a business development staff working with me, and I would periodically go out with them and see how the customer reacted to them, or I would check what's going on, their results, things like that.
Mhm. And I will close this, Mr. Kelly, with a very open-ended question. So I think there is a huge debate for young engineers as to what kind of elements are going to propel them towards becoming good leaders, people that others want to follow in the business, people that set the pace as you have done successfully in your endeavors. What would be your advice to the young engineers who want to become leaders?
The harder you work, the luckier you're going to get.
It's a great quote.
And That says a lot in that, okay? That says a lot. Don't watch your watch. Work until you're finished. Let your bosses, they will know that you're working until you're finished. Surprise them with success. Be there when they come and check. And they will check periodically. And they want to see you working your you-know-what off. So, I used to volunteer for work during off time in the Air Force. And I was several years ahead of my contemporaries in upgrading in the airplanes because of that. So just put in the extra effort. It may mean sacrificing a little bit of free time, but it's okay. That job, I said I was a program manager of a failed program. It was a terribly failed program. Relationships were horrible with the customer. There was no relationships within the program. I put in 12 hours a day for 365 straight days, every day of the week. No vacations, no off time, no nothing. But I knew everything about that program. I knew when everybody came to work, everything about them. I knew when everybody left. And I was there to help make decisions and give guidance. So just put in the extra time.
The dynamic you're describing now is something I've been thinking as a young person for a long time. That somebody who's leading a program has to be there more than everybody else. They have to be there the earliest, they have to leave the office the latest. And people in my cohort, they seem to believe that this model is obsolete and there's no reason for a leader to be acting this kind of manner. Do you believe that that model has merit today, in today's society, today's engineering structure?
Only if you want to be successful.
I really resonate with that. Really, deeply resonate with that. Mr. Kelly, thank you. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It is it is a very insightful journey. I believe that you are part of history. You're tied there. Um, I just hope that the students and young people who see this will be, I think it's more than an interview for me at least. I think they find the value that I'm able to find in your words.
Well, thanks, George. I appreciate that. Look, I'm happy to have follow-up discussions with you if you have more questions, or if you'd like to talk about other things. I'm happy with that. But trust your people, but verify what they tell you. Support them in their success. Okay, because as a leader, you can help them do things that they can't do themselves. And I've done that with all of my people. When I was a commander, I had about 1% of my squadron that was not so good. I could have occupied 90% of my time with that 1%, or I could just try to get those guys back and not pay attention to the other people, or pay attention to the other people and disregard that 1%. I did everything I could to help that 1%, but I didn't occupy a lot of my time with them. I applied my time with the right people and helped them get jobs that they wanted, schools that they wanted. And that people know what you're doing, and they'll watch you like a hawk. So again, support your people and they'll support you.
We are talking, you're bringing a very interesting point. Like we're talking about those high pressure environments where, as you mentioned before, mistakes are lethal. What I believe happens, especially like in my cohort as an engineer, is that you don't see the lethality of those mistakes. You're going to make a mistake, it's going to be amended because you might be a graduate or you might be even a program manager, but it doesn't sting in the moment. So when you're not in an environment like that, I think it allows for more mistakes. As you said, you were paying attention to that 1%, but you were mostly paying attention to the hotspots in the organization, the people who actually perform the way you want them to perform. I believe if this kind of mindset, if this kind of approach was to be dressed in an organization, in every organization, that organization would be scarily successful. This is what I believe, at least.
I agree. I agree with you. And look, my organization, when I was a commander, was very successful, but I had some wonderful people contributing to that at all levels. But to get that machine really up to that highest level, it takes a lot of effort on everybody's part to make that happen. And little things mean a lot to a lot of people. I mean, like we put in a lot of effort to get a guy promoted below the zone. He was a tech sergeant, which is a middle level non-commissioned officer. And we got him promoted below the zone. It was one of about 2 promotions out of 100,000 people that year. And he was absolutely shocked when I walked into his shop, and all of his people were there. He had probably 40 people working for him. And I told him, I said, "You're out of uniform, Sergeant." He goes, "No, sir." He was so sharp. I said, "But Master Sergeants wear 6 stripes and you only have 5. I said, "As of the second, you are a Master Sergeant." And I think he was absolutely ready to pass out. He was so shocked. But again, I didn't do that myself. I had a lot of help doing that, and it worked out beautifully. And the word spreads. These people are here for us. The whole organization is meant to try to support the organization. We are a team. Yes, there's a leader, but the team leads. Okay. If somebody knocked me out, someone else would pick up and run with it. The team was self-sustaining, and it was a momentum that everyone took pride in what they did. And that's a big word, pride. And once you have it, it's hard to beat it.
I've always been observing people. What I observe in you is that you don't carry the success on your shoulders. You always mention what I said, people, the people who helped you to do this. That I believe that humbleness that you have is what made you successful in all the endeavors that you place yourself within. Brings the question of what do you believe is a great leader, for instance. I think I know the answer, but I will let you answer this.
It's one who knows how to give direction, but also knows that he can't do that by himself. Inspire people. You've heard about building a fire under people rather than inside of them.
Yes.
And build that fire in their gut. Don't just try to threaten them and get the job done or else. You want them to be inspired to work with you. Take pride in themselves and their organization. Take pride in their work, whether that's sweeping the floor or building the finest engine. Whatever it is, do it the best you possibly can, and people will notice.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
My pleasure, George.
I want to wish you a beautiful afternoon. Thank you for this. Absolutely, if you had the time outside of an interview context, of course, I would like to talk to you more. I could keep you here for hours, to be honest. So, yeah, it means a lot to me. Thank you for allocating the time to do this.
My pleasure, my friend. Good luck in your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Have a beautiful afternoon.
You too, sir.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.